All right. It has been a minute since we've did this.
Been a little while, yeah.
Move some things around.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But we are here. First Alert Meteorologist Justin Bradford, Crystal Holloman. We are here because today, Wednesday the 5th, and tomorrow are First Alert weather days.
Yeah.
And you're here to tell us why.
Yeah, I want to let folks know. We obviously always want folks at home to have that first alert so you know how to plan what you're expecting for the day. The highlight of this is kind of a unique and interesting setup because a lot of people have been asking, why is today a first alert weather day? It's really because it's late tonight that we see the impacts come in, and well, if you happen to be moving around before our morning show as early as it starts or during and you don't happen to turn us on, we want you to know what's going on. And so again, it's late tonight into tomorrow. We're expecting some precipitation to start across the area. It comes in a variety of different types, and we're going to talk about why that is here. We're going to set that scene and also discuss a little bit more about again, what we're seeing for how long and where that's going to take place, because it's going to vary depending on where you are, and we've got all that to break down here today.
And we're not expecting like a huge snowfall or like so much ice that power lines are down, but it's enough to impact your day. Right,
and we're avoiding the brunt of this storm system, which is going to cause some major ice concerns outside of our state, in places like Indiana and Ohio, especially where they have, I think, some ice storm warnings in those locations. We do not have any here, and we've been saying all week, really since this weekend, this is not an ice storm by any stretch of the imagination. A few places might get a glaze to a few hundredths of an inch south of I-94, which is another thing we'll talk about, but most places at Lansing may not even see any ice out of this specifically. It might be more of a snow-sleet mix, but no matter what you see and how much, it's going to be a messy drive tomorrow morning. So that is, again, the primary reason that the first alert weather day is there.
I was going to say, it looks actually pretty nice outside for being February.
And that's the other thing is, again, that's kind of what is sort of interesting about this, is it's a first alert weather day, and yet we're not really seeing anything all day, and that's going to be the case. Cloudy skies across the area, pretty quiet conditions on all our locations on our Skycam network here, but it's really what's coming which has prompted this, and again, the icy mix is possible to come in overnight into play, and so that's what we're mainly focused on, a mixture of snow and sleet and also maybe a little freezing rain or freezing drizzle. So really how we're timing this out is late tonight into early Thursday morning tomorrow. This is a very quick moving system, in and out in a couple of hours, but happening in the middle of the night before most people wake up tomorrow morning. And so that possible ice accumulation could take place on roads, especially as you get towards I-94 and south. And this is a type of setup without a ton of snow to kind of mix in and blanket that you might find some areas, especially near I-94. You might look at the roads in the morning and say, oh, they just look wet. Well, this is where you can run into issues like black ice and other things like that as the wet conditions freeze up overnight. Going to be a little bit of drizzle in those places, although, again, I think it's more of a sleet-snow mixture. But sleet and freezing rain, very, very close together in a profile. We're going to talk about why that is in a moment, but poor travel conditions are expected no matter what. That's kind of the primary focus of our forecast here, and that's why we want folks to have that first alert and be weather aware. So here's a look at different precipitation types, and if you happen to catch us last week, I kind of delved into this a little bit during one of our 90 Minutes of News stories where I talked about how different precipitation types play into energy use and a few other things, but they also factor, of course, into travel. And so we're going to back this graphic out here. You can see the profile that you get when you're talking about the different precipitation types we'll see in the winter. With a warmer profile, and by warm here we mean above freezing, so it could still be 40 degrees, but that's where you'll get the rain profile. Of course, all cold air is going to lead to all snow. But this line is divided in the middle because there's different profiles in the atmosphere. Just because it's a certain temperature here at the surface doesn't mean that if you went a mile up into the atmosphere that it's the same. Yes, it's often usually colder, but that's not always the case. Sometimes when a warm weather system moves into a cold environment like the Great Lakes in the winter, you actually get precipitation that here may fall as snow could actually start way up in high cloud tops as rain and then falls into colder air and everything works out the way it does. But as that rain falls into a very cold layer of air, those droplets freeze. That's when they turn into ice pellets that we call sleet, have a little bit more of a grainy and fine, coarse texture than snow does, and they at least give you a little bit of traction on roads. The opposite is true with freezing rain, which is very close in the profile. In this, you happen to have a very large warm layer and then a very small cold layer near the surface. So as that rain falls through most of the atmosphere, it's not able to refreeze. It doesn't have time to do so before it gets to the ground level. And when that drop spreads out, whatever surface it hits, it refreezes on contact because the temperatures at the ground are colder than the air above. That's the setup we have tonight. It's going to be warm air coming into a cold environment, so we will never be very warm here at the surface. We'll be below freezing the whole event, but the air above us will be warm enough for it to fall as rain, and then it either turns into freezing rain or turns into sleet. And so that's our focus here. And as I mentioned, this is kind of another in-depth look at our graphic. You can see the vehicle and the truck coming in here with sleet where the truck was in this graphic. You at least get a little bit of traction on the roads, and you have a better likelihood of stopping. But with freezing rain, that's quite the opposite. It's very difficult for you to be able to do that, and this results in areas of black ice. And so when that happens, it goes back to your basic driving school training techniques. You don't need me to start a driving school class for you to understand this, but just a gentle reminder to keep your steering wheel straight. Don't brake. Just take your foot off the accelerator to slow down, and make sure that you turn into your steer, but don't overcorrect. Just gently. Obviously, you know, there's a lot that goes into this that you want to make sure that you do, but with any type of frozen precip, obviously it's not fun to deal with. That's why we want you to have the first alert, and with this given temperature profile that we have, again, it can all blend together sometimes, and that's exactly what we expect it to do tomorrow.
I will say, when you're in that situation with black ice, though, it is very, very, very hard to remember that.
Yeah, of course,
I just had it a couple months ago when we first got the freezing rain. It's hard to remember what you have to do in the moment. So.
Yeah, it is, and that's why with this event being tomorrow, maybe if you learn about it right now, if you deal with it tomorrow, maybe it'll be fresher on your mind, and so that's what we're hoping for people. Obviously, this once again is it's a unique setup when things like this happen in the winter. Most of our systems this time of year are snow-based, and if they are freezing rain, sleet, they tend to be a little more involved. This one looks like we're not drawing enough Gulf moisture into the system to really give us that large kind of ice storm, which is why we're not calling it an ice storm. And so we kind of wanted to look at that at a little closer view here very quickly. Big warm layer, that's freezing rain. Small warm layer, it's sleet, and if it's in between, it can vary depending on how much cold air is at the surface. If it has enough time to refreeze, I think to kind of look at it this way, the cold air on the far right, that's going to be north of mid-Michigan. The sleet profile you see there will be closer to what the atmosphere looks like through the center of our area, and if you get south of I-94, that's going to look like the left, where you have a larger warm layer. And so if you kind of tilt your head to the right looking at this graphic and think of it north to south from cold air down, that's how it's going to look as far as if you took a slice out of our atmosphere here in mid-Michigan. And so without being too confusing, that's all to say that if you're south of I-94, your profile will look like the left. If you're north of I-94 but near St. John's and south, it'll look like the sleet profile for part of the night, and then cold air if you're north of St. John's and M21. And so that's a good thing for us to keep in mind here. And this all plays in, all of this to say, here's our hour-by-hour forecast and how the event times out. So again, this evening might have a little brief burst of snow. It should not be very long duration or heavy, maybe just for a quick hour or so. I think at most this maybe throws down a very brief dusting somewhere between Lansing and Jackson and then fades off quickly. Most of the overnight is quiet until after midnight, and there's the system working in. Again, not a lot available for us to work with as far as moisture, which is why we don't have a lot of high precipitation totals of any variety. The pink you see there near and south of I-94 in Jackson, north of there it tends to be a sleet-snow mix, and north of Lansing it's probably all snow for many places. And so again, either way, whatever you get, this is going to be on the roads tomorrow morning. The temperatures at the surface are going to be low 20s to mid 20s, and so while salt and other road treatments will be effective, any untreated surfaces you're going to have issues on, back roads especially. The system pulls out tomorrow quickly though. You see by 9 a.m. the snow's already gone, and we're seeing just cloudy skies, maybe a little bit of wind as that starts to pick up. And you see that beginning as we head into the afternoon, especially bottom left of your screen there, 18 to 20 miles per hour sustained. It'll be gusting upwards of 30, 35 tomorrow, maybe a rogue gust near 40. But here's 5:30, and we may be back into sunshine by the end of the day tomorrow, funny enough, and we're going to have temperatures back above freezing. And so that means by the evening commute, we don't expect to have these issues on the roads. It's really just tomorrow morning that we're focused on, and we want folks to have that first alert, which is why we've had the first alert weather days. Now, of course, these don't mean that it's Armageddon. It's not the worst thing you've ever dealt with. It's not the worst thing you've dealt with this year, but it is something for you to be mindful of because undoubtedly, we know there will be probably a couple of accidents out there tomorrow. You just don't want to be those people. You want to be taking it slow and just being safe and smart on area roads. And so that's what we'll stay focused on here. So quick look at how much we're expecting, because this is what everyone's interested to know. Ice accumulation. These numbers, by the way, have been dialed back, and this may be even possibly a high-end solution for some of them. Lansing may be getting 1/100th of an inch. Any amount of ice can cause problems on the roads. But even if we get more sleet and snow, of course, any vehicles drive over that, it tends to melt into water on the roadways, right, in the tire tracks. Well, with the temperatures being like 25 tomorrow morning, those areas may refreeze if there aren't many vehicles on them, and so you still deal with ice either way, even if it's not falling directly. And so you get south of Hillsdale, maybe up to 1/10 of an inch, but I think the higher totals are going to be actually south of the state line of Michigan, where they have some major issues and concerns there. I am not expecting widespread power outages, anything like that with this event.
That was Jessica's question. Will there be enough to cause power outages?
Yeah, I think it's possible that we see some things like that in far southern parts of the state, but this isn't something that'll be widespread. And I think for a lot of folks who are in, especially the Lansing area, you've been following our first alert forecast throughout the week. You know that it's been very fluid. It's been changing based on new information coming in, and the freezing rain component in Lansing specifically not looking like a big factor anymore. It looks more like snow sleet for us, which again, of course, is good news. And you can see that with this ice graphic here, but it doesn't mean that we don't have anything to deal with. So in fact, I'll prove that here with the predicted snowfall. Trace amounts with that weak little disturbance that comes through this evening, the stripe in the middle. But you see by tomorrow morning, it's not a lot, but maybe an inch of snow and sleet in some spots. It's probably less in most places too, but either way, this is going to slick up the roads, and it doesn't take much. We know when we prepare and see 3, 4, 5 or more inches of snow on the ground, we know there's a lot of snow, and it tends to be a little more concerning for folks. But it actually is these events that happen more often where we get an inch or two of snow that around here seem to cause more issues, and I think it's because people feel more confident.
That's what I was just going to say.
Driving around.
That little bit of ice, you're like, oh, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get a ton of ice, you know it's bad.
And the other thing, you're absolutely right. The other thing is with a little bit of it, there are some stretches which are fine on the roads, and you're just humming along, and you might even get a little extra false confidence, and you get a little more speed going, and you go, oh, this isn't too bad, and then you hit one of those patches that seems to come out of nowhere. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. You can have a clean road the whole way, not have any issues. But, I mean, if you're getting from point A to point B, doesn't matter how much you're spending in the good. As soon as you hit one bad, obviously, there can be bad results. And so that's something that we're looking at here. I guess another quick note here for folks, after this predicted snowfall graphic here, I wanted to show the 10-day because the Saturday system working in is another thing we're keeping close eyes on that we're bringing you a first alert to. We don't have any sort of day declared at this point for that, but Saturday's system is another one that moves into the Great Lakes from the south and west, and near the state line and south there may be a little more of a mixing component. That to me looks like more sleet-based than freezing rain, just based on the expected profile. But it could be a swath of heavy snow from Jackson north to Lansing and through and north of us here. We could see several inches of snow with the system on Saturday.
Okay.
So we're keeping an eye on that too. Obviously, this is the Super Bowl weekend upcoming with that game on Sunday, but if you have any Saturday afternoon or evening plans, maybe be sure to check back in with our forecast updates, because we're going to have many of them over the coming days. Next week, we've also got some quieter weather, it looks like, which is nice, but it will be seasonably cool as well, highs in the 20s. In fact, the only day in the 10-day I have topping 30 is on Thursday, tomorrow. And so that may be the last chance for 10 days or so until we get back to it. And then the one other thing to note is middle of next week, low 20s highs and overnight lows and near single digits. Could be some colder weather. That's why we do have, there have been a couple of things that have gone out. I know that the code blue has been activated by the city of Lansing. And so that's something that, again, for the folks who need to utilize those facilities, you'll be able to do so with the weather. Again, seasonably cool, not the brutal cold that we saw a couple weeks ago, but still not something that's fun to deal with outside. And, of course, any little bit of a breeze factors into it, too. After that, everyone's eyes will be on late next week, Valentine's Day. Whether or not people are celebrating it, whatever plans you may have heading into that weekend, we could have another system moving into the area. So be mindful of that. Still 10 days away. It is the 5th, so 9 days away to Valentine's Day. But, I mean, still, we're going to keep eyes on that. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to bring temperatures back by the second half of the month here, February. But the trend is taking us towards slightly below average temps and wants to get us back into the storm track once we get past the end of this 10-day, which I don't have here. But it is something we'll be keeping an eye on. In the meantime, very classic winter pattern here. Again, tomorrow, just be very mindful, have that first alert. Give yourself like 5 extra minutes to get to your destination. You won't need to worry about anything. Just be patient, take it slow. Don't be that person who ends up, you know, you don't want to be on our news tomorrow. You just don't want to. So the reality is that this is not, again, Armageddon system, but just want you to be first alert and have that awareness heading into the morning tomorrow.
And I did put in the chat, there's a couple of links. One is to the Lansing Code Blue story where there's some warming shelter information over the next few days. You can find that. And I also included your article, your story on the different types of weather, winter weather. Yeah. So you can check that out if you haven't already.
Sure.
It's all on our website, WILX.com, but there's some direct links right there in the chat as well. We did have a couple of questions, but it seems like you answered them all.
Okay.
Mostly was, will the power stay on? Because that's always a big thing, because it affects everybody.
Of course, and a big concern, especially when it's winter.
Yeah.
Or summer when it's really hot, but in winter when it's really cold, and you know it's not as easy to heat up. Yeah, we're not expecting anything major tomorrow. Maybe isolated outage you get towards the state line, but it all depends on how much ice and what it does to power lines, trees near the state line. I think, again, ice is not going to be a huge concern for us on a widespread basis. It's maybe a couple of especially untreated roads and surfaces tomorrow that could be of issue. But as I said, whether or not you're seeing freezing drizzle, sleet, or snow tomorrow morning, we're going to have a bit of a sloppy commute. And so everybody is going to want to have that first alert for tomorrow morning. Again, not end of the world by any means, but we want you to be aware and have that first alert.
That's why we do it, to make sure that you have it before you start your day. You're going to be on Studio 10 in about an hour and a half.
Yeah, coming up. We'll talk a little about the forecast. Of course, Andy Provenzano will be in during the evening to give you the last-minute updates before you go to bed. And then, of course, tomorrow morning, Chief Meteorologist Darren Rockhold will have a live updated look. So when you wake up and you are heading out to hit the roads, Darren will give you the latest update and probably have some real-time looks at road conditions as far as how things look. As always, we're hoping that there's the lesser impacts, the better. On days like this, I would love to be wrong. You don't understand. More than anybody knows at home. Obviously, accuracy is something very important to me for a lot of reasons, but we love to be wrong about these events. And the thing is, earlier in the week, we were trending towards maybe seeing more of this. And the good news is this has been trending south for us. So it kind of stinks for folks in Indiana and Ohio, but it's good for us here in mid-Michigan. And so that's been good, and that's why we've wanted to continue to update the forecast. And again, to clarify, and I've said it 100 times, this is not an ice storm, but we could still deal with some icy conditions tomorrow morning.
We did have one more question from Shelley. She wants to know if there will be school closings. It wouldn't be because of ice, most likely, unless the roads are so bad that buses can't get
I think it's mainly, school closings will mainly be a concern for communities, especially that are outside of the areas that tend to get salted and tend to get treated. I mean, if you have back roads and they aren't taken care of, you'll have problems tomorrow morning just as far as slipping and sliding a little bit. The treated surfaces, salt should be, and other treatments should be effective because temperatures will be in the 20s, and so that's good news. But as far as school closings go, I think you need a little more ice, probably a little more in the way of snow. A lot of superintendents will say it's tough to close a school when you get like a ½ inch to an inch of snow or sleet. Obviously, safety is primary concern, but I think as long as surfaces are treated tomorrow, probably not a ton of school closings. I certainly am not expecting anything widespread because this is not going to be a huge ice event or anything for us, and it's only limited amounts of snow and sleet too. So I think folks will be fine getting to where they need to go, and most schools will be in session. I'd maybe look to see the further south. You get into Hillsdale County, Branch, Lenawee, maybe you see a few places close preemptively because they could get up to a 1/10 of an inch of ice. But again, ice storm warning, anything like that that's going on in Ohio, you need like close to a 1/4 inch in order to meet that criteria.
That's heavy.
Yeah, we're not going to be anywhere close to that here, which is good, obviously. So
Get those kids in school.
I think the better chance for school closings, I'll say, probably not Lansing area, further south of Jackson and I-94 maybe, but even that'll depend on how things look in the morning. They probably will not make a call tonight. It'll be one of those 5:30, 6 a.m. wake ups you get if you're a parent. So just be mindful of that. And hopefully, again, everybody's staying safe out there. If you have any questions, you can always email us at WILX. Our weather information is always available online. The First Alert Weather app's free to download, and it's a great tool to have. And we'll continue to provide updates all the way through the event. And also the Saturday system, which could bring us several inches of snow. And you'll want to have...
people might be driving to go to Super Bowl parties and stuff like that, too. So
yeah, sure. Or the weekend, people like to travel. They go here and there. And so I've got an 8-month-old son. His grandparents love to see him, so we drive towards the Detroit area. And if we're doing that on Saturday, which has been our plan, maybe we either go earlier in the day to beat the snow or figure something else out. So you get those updates too.
And for Shelley, I did add a link to where our school closings will be listed if and when they do come in. But again, make sure you check out in the morning. That's likely when they're going to be all coming in. Not a whole lot preemptively this far out, but. All those links are right there in the chat. Even when the live stream ends, you can still access them. You can still ask us questions. We won't answer them live, but we'll get back to you with those questions. And like Justin said, reach out to the First Alert Weather team. That's what they're here for.
Yep, exactly right. It's what we do. We love what we do, and we love that everybody stays safe, and hopefully you use our information. And we appreciate you watching, as always.
All right. Well, you'll check Justin out in about an hour and a half on Studio 10, and then Andy will be back starting with News 10 at 5 p.m. We'll have the latest for you. Thanks so much for tuning in with all of your questions, and stay safe out there.